Started.
All right, so welcome to the OpenWhisk Tech Interchange call. This is Wednesday, October 16th. I have an agenda of a few items to go through. Looking through the participant list, I don't see anyone new who'd like to introduce themselves. Are there any topics anybody wants to inject so I can add them on here? Otherwise, I'll go through the agenda as should be displayed on the screen now. All right, very well. So first pull requests, I'll go through those. Wanted to discuss a little bit release plans going forward. Then I wanted to show the playground UI. This is something new that Shane's added, and I think is kind of a nice addition to the OpenWhisk getting started experience, so I'll show that. And then I had asked Bill Zong if he wanted to go through his PR 4648 on CPU constraints in the scheduler. But I think he's not on the call yet. So if he does join, then we can go over it. Otherwise, perhaps next time we can go through that. And then I wanted to discuss something about project infrastructure and testing, some thoughts related to recent issues where our intra-repository things, intra-repository dependencies cause some issues downstream. All right, so PRs of note, I went through the last 15 days of PRs that were merged or opened. I've got the PR numbers here. I didn't provide the links. It gets a little too verbose. So standalone controller enhancements, I think there's been a bunch of work going on from Jane on this. So PR 4670, 4680 basically enabled lots of different ways of running the standalone controller. Sorry, Dave Marinelli, I'm not sure I know who you are. Do you want to introduce yourself? Or at least go on mute. All right, thank you. So I'm going to show one of those enhancements, adding the playground UR. There's been some work on adding operational statistics and visibility, so capturing sizes of documents and various other metrics. One of those merged, the other is open for review. I have looked at it. If others have not looked and they care about this, suggest going through it. That's 4660. Also some work on exposing Kafka metrics for user events. This was merged, 4665. Dave, thanks for your help in renaming action loop Golang to action Golang. This just drops the loop from the action kind prefix. I think because we're using the new Golang proxy for essentially all the runtimes that require pre-compilation, I think there's no semantic meaning of the loop anymore, and it works in sort of the classic mode and the new mode. So I think this is a cleaner change. Some work from Shane also on enabling performance testing in sort of a local mode, so removing the activation store. And so there's an implementation of the action store interface that basically no-ops everything. And then there's 4 open PRs. I think 2 or 3 of these are ready for merging, but have either not received a review or not enough attention yet. So Grafana dashboard changes, I think this is ready, 4669. The playground UI, I'm going to go through that now. Both Shane and I are contributors on that, so probably should have someone else take a look and approve it before we merge. The PR from Bill Zong on CPU limit considerations and scheduler, I think this is interesting. It sort of changes the model for allocating containers at the invoker level, and then surfaces a little bit of that to the scheduler, so that the allocation of the CPU fraction isn't hard-coded. I may not cover it in great detail if the PR's author isn't on here. And then there's a PR I opened some time ago, maybe a few weeks ago, 4638. I think this is non-breaking in that I believe production systems are probably not using this subject view. or if they are, there's, we probably shouldn't delete the old view. But in any case, I think this requires some consideration. It cleans up sort of an old relic of how we used to generate UUID keys, and it factors out the subject view so that operators can actually use their own view rather than the hard-coded one. It builds on a previous PR that was merged before this one. Any questions on open PRs or anything to add? All right, and we'll go on. Release plans, I think I went through the downloads list. I see that we've released almost all the relevant components recently. I think there's 2 that are notable that have no releases or I think are due for release. So the obvious one is the OpenWhisk main repo. I think we're fairly close at this point, and maybe just including the standalone controller could be the last piece here before we can say we have enough and there's been enough substantial changes to declare a new release, and whether we should call that V1 or some incremental bump on our last release was version 0.9. I don't know if Dave, you have any thoughts on this? We should probably take it to the dev list anyway.
Yeah, we should take it to the dev list. We should make a release. It's been 18 months since the last release of the core system, so that's a little ridiculous. I think as soon as we get the standalone controller done, there's a couple of other issues we'll have to deal with. So there's the issue about the test cases. We can't have the zip files in the in an Apache release, so we have to deal with that. And then we can get to this when you talk in your later bullet point. But our infrastructure is rotting. So like Jenkins is not building Docker images right now. So we haven't built those for a week.
Right. Yeah, I thought we discussed that at the end.
Yep.
I think on the test and zip files, we can unzip all the sources and then sort of commit to pure sources in there. And then we just might need a bootstrap script so that when we run Travis, it creates the zip files. So we don't have to change a lot of the tests. Fair point. The Kubernetes repo, I think, has had no releases. I don't know if it's in a stable enough state to actually cut a release for it. I know it gets a lot of traction. I think probably the one of a lot of interest to people who actually want to run this on their own. But I don't follow sort of the development there as closely as I should. So I don't know if once we've cut the main repo release, if we're then ready to also cut a Kubernetes release, and if that's worthwhile to do.
Yeah, no, we should be. We are ready, and we should do that. It's basically I don't want to do a Kubernetes release that doesn't have a back-end release of the main repository. Otherwise, it's not. That's the blocking issue.
Right. Okay. I thought so. Very well said. And I think those are the 2. I don't think there's any others. And there's a DevTools repo. I don't know if we want to cut a release of that or if there's anything meaningful in there. I think with the standalone controller, it makes the stand-up experience of the system a lot easier. I've been using it actually as my go-to development and demo mode versus the Vagrant or the Compose model. But others I think might want to weigh in on whether we want to cut a release of the DevTools repo in any capacity. All right, so we'll follow that up then on the dev list. Okay, so I thought I'd then shift gears and talk about the OpenWhisk functions playground and do a quick demo. So I demoed this before. It was something we did at Nimbella for convenience of developing functions quickly, being able to share small functions, and for demo purposes. We've cleaned that up, removed any Nimbella branding, and then converted it into OpenWhisk. To make it more OpenWhisk native. Chain helped with that as well. And he's integrated with the Playground UI. So the way it works, you're going to see it in a second, is basically, it pops up in the browser, and it's fairly small and self-contained. And this is a seed implementation. There's actually a few improvements we've made locally that I wasn't able to quickly isolate out, but which will contribute as a subsequent PR. But it basically allows you to just author functions in just about every one of our languages that we support. So what's bundled now is Node, Python, Go, Swift, and PHP. Those are included, and you can actually author them in source. Java, for some reason, was giving me an issue around the definition of the main function, so I need to investigate that. And we can add others, so we can add .NET and Rust at some point as well. These would just go into the UI's JavaScript helper. There's essentially a section that says, here are snippets of code for every language. Is there a question?
No.
Okay. And in fact, if you did surface this and run this behind a web server, you can actually export your functions as web actions and use them as open APIs if you so desire. But it's also convenient for local testing. So let me just switch screens. So I just pulled, before the demo started, I pulled the latest PR for the playground, which is actually running this UI. So when you start this up, I'm not going to do it again just because it takes a while to start up, a few seconds. It essentially launches the browser, and you see this view here. So it starts up on localhost playground UI, and it's serving the playground UI directly in your browser. And you click run, and you'll see it actually runs. It's low open with small parameter section, so you can see, you know, and there you go. So JavaScript, here's Python. Again, it's one of our samples. Here's a Swift source. Swift is a little slow because it has to compile. Go, PHP, I'm not going to go through all of them. Another neat thing about this is that the output section actually supports images. So here's a snippet of code that I pasted, which does image resizing. And if I show you this image, it's a fairly big picture of a cat. And when you actually run this here, it shrinks the cat size down, and you can pass in the parameters. Let's see if this will actually work. I haven't tried this. If it'll skew or not. Okay, should have tested that first. Ah, right. Let's plug in the code. Okay, and something I have to look into, but the size of the image should have changed. It didn't. In any case, I think this is a nice experience out of the box. You sort of get started. You have the UI there. There's a discussion on the dev list that Shane started about, should the UI be the standard? It should be enabled by default. So when you start up the standalone controller, does it bring it up? And I thought yes. I would expect that sort of for the developer mode, who wants to use this locally, it's easy enough to close the browser and just go back to having the API endpoint being served. But for the novice who just wants to get started, it might be a nice thing to sort of, you run the standalone controller, you can run a function instantly, within 2 or 3 clicks, and you're off to go. I didn't show the web action export. Let me just do that. So I can say publish. So here you'll see this is the URL on my local host. And if I give it URL, there it is. So that works. All right. Bill, I saw you joined. Do you want to take over and talk about your PR?
Yeah.
All right. Do you have slides you want to share?
No slides.
Or do you want to just talk about it then? You said no slides? You can go ahead. Yeah. You're muted.
Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you, yes.
Okay. Thanks for taking this. I'm sorry for late for this tech meeting. I'll try to explain something about this my PR. Okay, I'll have a for this PR. I want to explain my ideas about why I developed this and how I do it, and show some demos for you guys. First of all, we are developing OpenWix on several KAS clusters currently, and with different hardware configurations. Some with some like a 4G cores, four CPU cores, and 8 GB memory, and some are 2-core CPU and 4 GB memory. So most of our actions recently are AI functions. So it will boil out the CPU instead of the memory. When I was doing performance tests on those nodes to make a better performance, I used several days to figure out the best configure for one action and one kind of nodes. That would be hell if the site expand to dozens. So and even more, I wonder what if the cluster nodes are made of some kind of different hardware capacity. So I'll try to figure out how to solve those cases. So I use the CPU limit mode. I developed this PR. And currently, as far as we know, the OpenWix cluster now use pool config memory, use a memory pool to configure the invoker's pool size. And for most of the time, we use as much memory as possible. For example, when the nodes are 8 GB memory, we might use 6 GB to set the pool config, the user memory pool. And the Docker CPU sharing would do as much better than us. But for AI functions, AI functions are CPU consumed type actions. So the drops on CPU queue are too much sometimes. So we have to reduce the user memory pool size in order to not to boiling out the CPU. And then I found out that will reduce the CPU sharing performance. Okay, this is the first case. And for the second case, if the invoker nodes are made of a different hardware capacity, just like I described, we have to use the lowest user memory pool size to achieve the system's stability. For example, as we use a 4 GB of 2 CPU and 4 CPU node together, we have to use the lowest one. That is the 2 CPUs nodes. And then I wondered what if we could just handle it out. So that means we failed. Those cases means we have to we could not fully exploit the performance of the system. So, and I will show my PR and about the key points. The detail is shown here. I'll show you. I'll share. Not too much of it. Yeah. Oh. Yeah, here is my PR. And the detail of it is I developed it the way as I described here. And I have a picture to show you. Okay, that is the, gosh, where did I put it? Yeah. As you can see here, hey, did I miss out?
We're not seeing a picture. Are you trying to switch?
Yeah, I'm trying to switch, but I could not find the file. Sorry. Yeah, here it is. You see it?
Yes.
You see the picture. Yeah. This is most of my my ideas. Yep, we got this controller, and here we got a load balance in it. And when there are two nodes join this cluster, we got a node 1 and node 2. They are the different hardware capacity. One is 4, one is 2 CPUs. And invoker 1, for example, we'll use I use the Docker container actually to run this run dash CPUs to start the Docker. Yeah, that's in contrast of the dash CPU shares. Yeah, and invoker pool use those CPUs info as the slots, quite the way as the memory. So I'll just lift it up like a resource, not just memory, but resource slots here. So then we could manager the load balance could manager those machines, those nodes, the same way as the memory slots. Yeah, that's most of my idea here. Any questions about this?
So I think in general, this is for a heterogeneous cluster. Is that right? So when you have different nodes with different configurations, I mean, today it's CPUs, but you can imagine this could be other resources in the future, like a GPU. Are you thinking that far ahead, or this is mostly just about resource allocation at the core level?
For simplicity, I just use this CPUs is the CPU threads number of the node, of that node. So node 2, if the node 2 is registered, this invoker is registered, he will just send the runtime CPU thread numbers to the load balancer. Do you get it? How to explain? Just, when an invoker is registered to the controller, to the load balancer, it will just upload its runtime CPU thread numbers.
I don't remember if the way this is implemented, it's behind a feature flag. So if, it could be done in a way where, the existing behavior is preserved. And then, if you want to turn this on, then you can turn this on.
Okay. So I'll continue about it. Sorry for about this. Okay.
Any other comments?
The detail about it. You want to know some detail about these PRs ideas. I wrote it down here. You could. Can you see this PDF? Sorry, can you see
Not
this
seeing a
PDF?
PDF. Nope, not seeing a PDF. Just a screen
Okay.
shot of the picture.
Okay. PDF. Okay. Yeah. Sorry about it. Yeah. That is the detail. I wrote it. I copied it from my PR, and I want to explain some of it. First of all, I just used a config that is a switch to enable or disable this feature. If we disable it, we'll use the older way. That is the memory pool to control the slots. And when it turn on, we'll use the new CPU limit mode, which will do this way. First of all, each invoker will report its CPU thread info when registering. And second, sharding container pool balancer, that is the common way, the common implementation of the load balancer. We'll use the CPU slots, the same behavior as the memory slots. And third, the container pool will use the CPU and memory together, not just the CPU. For some cases, we might use the CPU very low, but with a very large memory. That will cause the out of memory error. So I'll just put them together to limit those errors. Fourth, I'll just add a new method. That is a new SPI method for not to do too much modification to the already used method. So the fifth one is to add another method to use this CPU method for not bother the older way. That I will show you later. Action and CPU limit annotation. Add CPU limit annotations. I'll show you in the demo. And I add some parameter to the risk CLI, and I deployed a developer some modifications to the KAS deploy action project. Oh, okay. That's most of my ideas. Any questions about it?
Can I make one suggestion, which is making the invoker changes independent of the controller changes? Because one of the things that I see coming into play here is that the potential changes to sharding container pool balancer would be different depending on what container factory you're using at the invoker.
Yep. Yeah, you are right. But as we know, as far as I know, the sharding container pool balancer is not just for. Is for what kind of it? I sorry. I'll use my dictionary to translate.
While you do that, I think there's a couple of interesting things here. One is it decouples the CPU allocation from the memory allocation, right? So when you create an action today, you can't really control your CPU share. This is at least surfacing a little bit of a way to control the granularity of the compute independent of the memory. So I think it's a general good feature. It does change sort of the limits that actions can set, and sort of in addition to memory log limits and timeout, now you can set the CPU share. I think that was done in a way that's not backwards breaking in terms of schema changes, but in terms of the implementation, I think Tyson, it's a good point, and making sure that you have a load balancer that's consistent with the container factory. Make sure the implementation hangs together.
Yeah.
And we could discuss on the PR conversation as well. I just wanted to bring it up.
Yep.
Right. And I think there's a. Go ahead. Never mind.
Oh, come on. I'll just show. Take your time for a couple of minutes to show you the demo, and I'll finish my PR express presentation. Okay. Sorry for about. Yeah. Yeah. This one is my risk. Yeah, we got these limits with I just developed a. Yeah, as you can see here, I got a limits, CPU limit here, and I got the Docker. I got the 2 CPU as for the Docker program. Sorry about that. And I would show it. Action list. This one used 0.5 CPUs. This one used 0.4 CPUs. And I'll use a locus test file to test it. As you can see, no container here right now. And then I'll just bring it up. And I bring the, yep, it's a little late. Yeah, we've got this file container. Yeah, since 2 minus 0.4 equals to 5. And then I'll just change it to the 0.5 CPU actions 5. Then locus. Oh, sorry. Yep. And then we got this. Hey, excuse me.
I think it's right. I have 4 that are 15 seconds, and then 1 that was old. Maybe just didn't clean up correctly.
Yeah, might be. Okay. Yeah, that making these changes will make the deploymentation much easier. For we just don't need to configure and deploy, configure and deploy one and again, since the CPU sometimes measure much than memory when we're using AI functions. And yeah, that's my idea. Okay, I finish it.
Dave, you had a comment?
Stop it. Okay, any discussions about this to help?
Yep,
Yeah.
I think you've sent a note to the dev list, and I think we should just have discussion on the pull request itself going forward.
Okay.
I think there's some good things in here. Dave, did you have a comment?
Okay, I'll stop it.
No, I was just sort of wondering. I mean, so right now, I know some operators allocate CPU share in proportion to memory share. So you just need to make sure that keeps working, because that's, if you sort of think about what your costs are, that's sort of an appropriate way of doing it.
Right. Yeah, it is. I think behind the feature flag, I asked before to just confirm, but I looked through pull request again. So you can keep the existing behavior or switch and opt into this behavior. So at least on that side, it should not modify the way the current allocation was done.
Recently, I was still developing it for is making some CI test errors. I'll just keep on going, and I hope I will deliver a few days later.
I think one thing to discuss is there can be some different orders among resources. For example, some actions may have a higher priority on memory than CPU. It seems current PRs always check the CPU first. After they need check the memory to schedule actions. But at some point, the user might want to just want to consider the memory only or the CPU only or in a different orders and so on. So maybe we need to discuss that as well. I think this is a great feature because we can have heterogeneous invokers, but at some point in the future, we may have more types of invokers, such as some invokers have GPU and some invokers have other resources and so on. In those cases, maybe we need to, and user need to set the orders of resources as well. Do you consider these options?
Yeah. Actually, our team is developing on GPU actions. Since about as we know, the Docker command and support about the GPU is very weak. So I'll just start from the CPU, and then we'll just keep on going and move on to the GPU actions. Yeah, that's the point.
Yes, what I meant is we may have multiple resources, then maybe we need some orders among them. Maybe users want to configure which resources should be considered first. So currently your PRs only consider the CPU first, right?
Yeah, I got it. But the implementation is too big, about the configuration of different resources together, and then using the config to to use CPU and as the user wants. I don't think the PR will do this one PR in one PR, you know. So we'll just keep on keep on those modifications for even bigger options.
All right. Thanks, Billy.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
So the last topic I had was just talking about our general infrastructure for testing and CI/CD. There are a couple of things I had on my mind. One was some of our repos are not properly configured, so somebody can merge a PR with incomplete status checks. I was guilty of that last week, and there were a couple of breakages that snuck through as a result. I did take a note of all the repositories that need to be configured or reconfigured for that, and I think the only way to do it is to actually open a Apache infra ticket and ask them to do it. So I will do that. There is the downside that if we did do that, then sometimes when we do have breakages, we can't bypass Travis at all. So it's a little restrictive, but maybe in the grand scheme of things, it's the better thing to do. So that was one. Second is we have the Jenkins infra in Apache, which apparently has not been publishing some of our Docker images for nightly testing. Dave, I think you wanted to discuss that a little bit earlier. So if you want to weigh in on that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's there's not much to say other than it's not working, and it doesn't appear to be anything we did. I think it's probably a problem on the Jenkins machine. I was actually thinking about switching to run those jobs on the OpenWhisk dedicated machines instead of on the general pool, because then at least we have some control over the software stack that they're running on.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, there's a general issue. We have so many projects, and many of them are not being that actively developed. And so when something in the surrounding infrastructure changes, like Travis CI upgraded to Xenial by default, right? And so a lot of our stuff just stopped working. Pip changed. And we don't particularly notice, I think, is the problem.
Right.
Or have the resources to keep 35, 40 repos actually functional.
Right. There is so I think at least in terms of the breakage that was related to Gradle, and then the PR that was merged that removed some code that was used in other dependent repos. I wonder if we could do a checkout of all the repos in a Jenkins machine and sort of do a global build, kind of like, it would be a giant monolithic build, but it could catch cross repository breakages sooner, and then do some alerting on Slack. Would there be interest in setting that up? There's also whether we want to control more of our testing infrastructure. I know we had to go through some effort to get machines donated to Apache, and Adobe came through with a little bit of financial support for that. Amazon started recently a program where they're donating infrastructure credits on AWS for open source projects. We could apply for that and then basically have VMs there. That would be easier for us to control. Would that be something, how would people feel about that? Is that something worth pursuing?
I don't know. I mean, I think I don't object. It's just the care and feeding of it, right? We have the 3 VMs on the Apache infrastructure that no one is taking care of either, right?
Right.
But
Yeah.
if we think it would be useful and someone want, fine with it.
Right. I don't know if we get more control or if actually it's an issue of control versus just resources, people paying attention to the breakages sort of proactively versus reactively. We're sort of in a reactive mode. Something breaks, usually because somebody downstream actually detects it, versus us as maintainers paying attention to all the repos. And I think it's just the way the project's set up. There's just too many signals to pay attention to, and it's a lot of effort. And that effort generally falls on a few people. Okay. All right. So is there a plan for
at some level setting up a Jenkins job to just check everything out and build it all? It seems like it's worth doing. At least it's a useful alert. I don't know how easy or hard that is to do.
Yeah,
It's probably not that bad.
I think probably not. I think that part doesn't worry me. It's or is not so concerning. It's if we detected build failures that way, would that be actually helpful to the project? And there, I'm less sure, because if we do send alerts to our general channel, it would require somebody to actually pay attention to it. And we already have broken builds that we pay attention to only reactively when it blocks a PR or something like that. And maybe given that we have responsibilities elsewhere, that might be the way to keep doing it, but it means we'll have to live with breakages every now and then and address them as they come. The mono repo versus the multiple repos issue, I guess. I don't have anything else to talk about on this call other than to recruit somebody to host the next call in 2 weeks, which would be October 30th. Any volunteers?
And that's the call I won't be around for to record. The Zoom is, you're welcome to use it. It's set up so anybody can start it. But if you want to record it, you might have to send out, whoever wants to host a meeting, to send out a new link or their own WebEx or something.
Okay, let's get a volunteer first and then we can figure out the recording.
Okay. I should be able to host it. I would probably just be inclined to use the Zoom and not worry about recording it, but we can figure that out later.
All right. Dave, you're it. Any last comments? All right, thanks everyone.